This broke man was about to lose his home until his dog led him to something buried in the dirt. He chose honesty over greed, and that decision made him rich. But the real twist? This dog already knew everything.
Ethan Miller lived in a small, worn-out rental house on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, with his dog, Max. The house wasn't much: peeling paint, a broken fence, and an air conditioner that barely worked during the brutal summers. But for Ethan, the condition of the house wasn't the problem. The problem was the rent notice taped to the front door. Final reminder: payment due. Ethan worked a private job as a warehouse associate for a logistics company. The work was exhausting: lifting boxes, long shifts, no appreciation. He clocked in 6 days a week, yet his paycheck barely covered rent, groceries, and utilities. Savings? That was a joke. Every evening, Ethan sat at the small kitchen table, staring at his bills, while Max lay quietly beside him. The dog seemed to sense Ethan's stress, resting his head on Ethan's knee as if to say, "You're not alone." The landlord didn't care. "You're 2 weeks behind," the landlord said over the phone. "If the rent isn't paid by the end of the month, you'll need to move out." That night, Ethan barely slept. Max stayed awake too, pacing the house, stopping every now and then to check on his owner. Ethan felt like a failure, not just as a man, but as someone responsible for another life. A week later, they packed what little they owned into Ethan's old sedan and moved into a cheaper rental on the far edge of the city. It was a tiny one-bedroom unit in a decaying apartment complex. The lights flickered, the water pressure was terrible, and the neighborhood didn't feel safe, but the rent was lower. Life didn't get easier. Ethan worked even harder, volunteering for overtime, taking extra shifts whenever possible. Still, his paycheck stayed small. Inflation was rising, gas was expensive, groceries cost more every week. Sometimes Ethan wondered if this was all life had planned for him. Neighbors laughed when they saw him talking to Max like a human. "A broke guy and his dog," they joked. But Max wasn't just any dog. One evening, after Ethan came home completely drained, Max started acting strangely. He stood by the door, whining, pacing back and forth, his eyes locked on Ethan, as if he was trying to say something. "Easy, boy," Ethan said, confused. "What's going on?" Max didn't calm down. That night, as Ethan lay on his mattress staring at the ceiling, one thought kept repeating in his mind: "If I lose this job, we lose everything." And somewhere deep in the darkness, Max quietly watched, waiting for the moment that would change both their lives forever. But what Ethan didn't know was that his dog was about to lead him to a twist he never saw coming.
The bad news didn't take long to arrive. One Monday morning, Ethan was called into the office. The warehouse manager didn't even look him in the eye. "Company's cutting costs," he said. "Your job's safe, for now, but your pay is getting reduced." A pay cut. Ethan nodded, signed the paper, and walked out in silence. He already knew what that meant: less groceries, late bills, maybe even losing this apartment too. That evening, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone, doing the math over and over. No matter how he calculated it, the numbers didn't work. His chest felt tight. Max sensed it immediately. The dog didn't eat his food. Instead, he stood near the door, whining softly, then looking back at Ethan. He grabbed Ethan's sleeve gently, tugging it toward the door. "What is it, buddy? You want to go out?" Max barked once, sharp and urgent. It was unusual. Max was normally calm at night. Still, Ethan grabbed the leash and followed him outside. The desert air was cool, the apartment complex quiet, except for distant traffic. Instead of heading toward their usual walking path, Max pulled hard in the opposite direction, toward an abandoned strip mall behind the complex. "Max, this isn't our route," Ethan said, but Max didn't stop. They reached the back of the building, where old trash bins and broken pallets were stacked. Max suddenly stopped and started digging at the ground near a cracked concrete slab. "Hey, stop that," Ethan said, stepping closer. Max barked again, louder this time. Confused, Ethan used his foot to move the loose dirt aside. His shoe hit something solid, metal. He bent down and brushed away more dirt. It was a rusted metal box, partially buried. Ethan's heart started racing. "Where did you find this?" he whispered. The lock was already broken. With shaky hands, Ethan lifted the lid. Inside were old documents, a leather-bound notebook, and a small pouch. Ethan opened the pouch first. Gold coins. Real gold. His breath caught. This can't be real," he muttered. The notebook had a name written inside, Robert H. Caldwell. Ethan didn't recognize it, but tucked between the pages was a folded paper, an address just a few blocks away, and a note written in faded ink. "If you're reading this, fate brought you here. Do the right thing." Ethan looked down at Max, who was sitting calmly now, tail wagging. "How did you know?" Ethan asked quietly. Max just stared back, almost knowingly. Ethan didn't sleep that night, because deep down he knew one thing for sure. That box wasn't an accident, and Max wasn't just a dog. The next morning, Ethan sat at his tiny kitchen table, the metal box placed carefully in front of him. Max lay beside his feet, calm, almost proud. Ethan hadn't slept more than an hour. His mind kept racing with the same question. What am I supposed to do with this? He opened the pouch again, just to be sure it was real. The weight of the gold coins was undeniable. This kind of money could fix everything: rent, bills, even a fresh start. No more stress, no more fear. But the notebook kept pulling at him. Ethan flipped through the pages. It wasn't a diary, it was a business journal. Notes about land investments, startup funding, and something called Caldwell Logistics, LLC. One page mentioned a terminal illness, another mentioned regret. At the back of the notebook was a letter. "I built everything alone. I trusted no one. Now I have no one. If someone finds this, I hope they choose honesty over desperation." Ethan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was desperate, but something in his chest felt heavy, like ignoring this letter would break something inside him. He looked at Max. "You led me here," Ethan said quietly. "What do I do now?" Max stood up and walked to the door, tail wagging, then looked back at Ethan. "The address." Later that afternoon, Ethan stood outside a modest suburban house. He rang the doorbell, heart pounding. An elderly woman opened the door. "Yes?" "I'm sorry to bother you. I found something that belongs to Robert Caldwell." Her face changed instantly. "My husband," she whispered. "He passed away 2 years ago." Inside the house, Ethan placed the box on the table and explained everything. The woman, Margaret Caldwell, covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "He hid this because he didn't trust banks anymore," she said. "I thought it was gone forever." Ethan expected her to take the box and thank him. Instead, she reached into the notebook. "This journal, these are company records. My husband's business still exists, but I don't understand any of it." She looked at Ethan closely. "You returned something that could have changed your life," she said. "Why?" Ethan hesitated. "Because I didn't want to lose myself." Margaret smiled softly. "My husband always said, when fate takes something,
It gives something back. A week later, Ethan received a call. Margaret had reviewed the records. Caldwell Logistics still had dormant assets and unsettled partnerships. She needed help managing them. "I want you to work with me, and I want you to own part of it." Ethan nearly dropped the phone. His life didn't change overnight, but it shifted. And Max? Max stayed close, watching every move, as if he knew this was only the beginning, because the biggest transformation was still coming.
6 months changed everything. Ethan still worked hard, but now it was different. Instead of lifting boxes in a warehouse, he sat in meetings, reviewed contracts, and learned the business side of logistics under Margaret Caldwell's guidance. Caldwell Logistics wasn't a giant company, but it had something valuable: connections, property rights, and untapped potential. Ethan absorbed everything. He studied late at night, watched business videos, read books, and asked questions no one else bothered to ask. Slowly, deals started closing. Old partnerships were revived. A new regional contract brought in steady revenue. The first time Ethan saw his profit share hit his bank account, he stared at the screen in disbelief. For the first time in his life, he wasn't drowning. He moved out of the broken apartment complex and into a small but clean house in a quiet neighborhood. When he brought Max inside, the dog ran from room to room, tail wagging wildly, like he already knew this place belonged to them. A few months later, Ethan bought his first car. Nothing flashy, but brand new. As he sat behind the wheel, Max in the passenger seat, Ethan laughed to himself. "We made it, buddy." But something still didn't add up. One evening, while cleaning out old emails and files Margaret had given him, Ethan came across an old photo. It showed Robert Caldwell standing beside a young German shepherd, the same markings as Max. Ethan's heart skipped. He showed the photo to Margaret. "That was Ranger, Robert's dog. Smartest animal I've ever seen. He disappeared shortly before Robert died." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Max! That night, Ethan sat on the floor, holding Max's face gently in his hands. "You knew it, didn't you?" Max didn't move. He just stared back, calm, loyal, knowing. A vet visit confirmed it. Max was much older than Ethan thought, older than he should have been. Somehow, impossibly, Max had survived, and somehow he'd found Ethan. Not by accident. Ethan realized something then. Max didn't just help him find the box. Max chose him, because he needed someone honest, someone who would return what wasn't his, someone worthy of a second chance. But life had one more test waiting, because success doesn't just bring comfort, it brings attention, and not everyone was happy about Ethan's sudden rise. Success changed Ethan's life, but it also painted a target on his back. As Caldwell Logistics grew, Ethan began receiving pressure from unexpected places. A former business partner of Robert Caldwell, Victor Hale, resurfaced, claiming that part of the company's assets belonged to him. Lawsuits were threatened, rumors spread, investors grew nervous. Victor wanted control. "You're just a warehouse worker playing CEO," Victor sneered during a meeting. "Walk away or this gets ugly." Ethan refused. "I didn't build this on lies. I won't protect it with fear." Late one night, after leaving the office, Ethan noticed something wrong. His front door was open. Inside, the house was trashed, papers everywhere, drawers pulled out. And Max was gone. Panic took over. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed poor. Come alone." The location attached was the same abandoned strip mall where everything began. Ethan didn't call the police. He drove.
At the strip mall, Victor stood waiting. Max was tied nearby, silent but alert. "You owe me," Victor said. "That dog led you to what should have been mine." Ethan stepped forward slowly. "No," he said. "He led me to who I was supposed to be." Victor lunged. Before Ethan could react, Max broke free, lunging between them. In the chaos, security lights turned on, sirens echoed. Margaret had tracked the threats and called the police. Victor was arrested. Max collapsed. The vets said Max's body was failing. Age, stress, and years of survival had caught up. Ethan sat beside him through the night, holding his paw. "You didn't save my life once," he whispered. "You saved it every day." Max passed away peacefully before sunrise. A year later, Ethan stood outside his new home, a place he owned. His car sat in the driveway. Caldwell Logistics had expanded nationwide. But inside the house, one thing mattered more than any success: a framed photo of Max. Ethan established the Ranger Foundation, named after the dog's original name, supporting struggling workers and animal shelters across the country. Because Ethan understood something most people never learn. Money can change your life, but loyalty changes who you are. And sometimes the ones who guide us to greatness walk on four legs.